Has everyone had a chance to navigate to the websites? Okay. I'm going to let you get there in just a second and tell you that if you, at this point, if you haven't gotten there, if you want to just add up your score, I'll tell you what, it'll look like this if you're going to get there online. If you want to do it by hand, that's fine. Each of these questions have the same answers and the same ranking or score total of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Of course you don't, because I haven't told you what page to go to. So on the top of the websites, there's a menu, and it'll say Loneliness Test. If you're on a smart device, you'll see the three little, what do we call that, the hamburger icon, the three little lines. And that pull down will say Loneliness Test. Are we ready? This was the technical nightmare I worried about all through this presentation. You have a dumb phone? You got a pencil? Yeah, so let's just do, those of you that haven't gotten there yet, let's just do it by hand. Are we ready? Okay, 10 questions. It should take about 2 minutes, and at the end, we'll have kind of a baseline score of our individual loneliness or vulnerability for isolation. And this quiz is nothing we made up. We're not that good. We went to the gold standard out there in the United States for kind of getting a personal assessment of loneliness, the UCLA Loneliness Quiz, which you'll see kind of propagated in a lot of different loneliness coverage out there. AARP uses it. The first question, though, is how often do you feel unhappy doing so many things alone? Never, give yourself a 1. Rarely, give yourself a 2. Sometimes, 3. Often, 4. Sure. The question is, how often do you feel unhappy doing so many things alone? Question number 2. How often I'm sorry for these pictures. We were feeling cheeky when we did this. How often do you feel you have no one to talk to? Never, 1. Rarely, 2. Sometimes 3. Always, 4. Question number 3. How often do you feel you can't tolerate being so alone? How often do you feel you cannot tolerate being so alone? Question 4. Am I going too fast? Going too slow? Yeah. Okay. How often do you feel as if no one understands you? Question 5. How often do you find yourself waiting for other people to call you or text? How often do you find yourself waiting for people to call or text? Halfway there. Question 6. How often do you feel completely alone? Question 7. How often do you feel unable to reach out and communicate with those around you? Oh, heard some groans there. Question 8. How often do you feel starved for company? Nine. How often do you feel it's difficult for you to make friends? And the last question. How often do you feel shut out and excluded by others? I'm sorry for that picture. Couldn't resist, sorry. That was me, it's all me, I blame me. Okay, let's get off that slide right away. All right, if you're taking the test online, you'll be able to push a button at the bottom of the screen, and it'll give you a score where the arrow is there. And in this case, it says moderate loneliness. If you're taking the test by hand, add up your score. A score of 0 to 10 equals little to no loneliness. 11 to 20, normal amount of loneliness. 21 to 30, moderate loneliness. 31 or over, extreme and severe loneliness. Well, what does all that mean? Little or no loneliness, great, congratulations. I don't know how you do that. 11 to 20 is the normal amount of loneliness. It's the proper level of feeling as often as we're supposed to feel it, to kind of like have that purpose for it, to jump us into action of getting around other people. 21 to 30, moderate loneliness. This is where you might want to start thinking about behavior changes or some of the interventions that we talked about, or just finding what you like doing, getting out around people. But it is the point, this is the window in which things work the most. You have the most desire, you have the most motivation to make change in your life. By the time you get to extreme and severe loneliness, it gets harder to do. It's like, I don't know, I'm a former smoker. The more I smoked, the harder it was to quit. Before we go to that, would anybody like to share their results? Oh, hey, please.
So I got a 22.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. So I scored 22, and so as I completed the actual questionnaire, I had to kind of frame my answers in terms of making sure I answered from the perspective of my work environment, my home environment, and other social environments. And so I can definitely see differences inside different areas, but at the same time, some of the things were universal.
It's a really simplified test. Some of the questions are kind of, well, it's hard to answer. Anybody else?
Someone over here.
Yes, sir.
Hold on, we got somebody over here.
Oh,
first.
okay.
Wait.
I'm sorry.
I scored 28. Profession, church, family, and no friends, and that's because they're all deceased because I'm so old. And, and it's hard, as they said, sometimes to really get out here when you're this age because there's not a lot of the ones that available. So you try to go down the generation and then you're rejected. So 28 is where I am.
Let's take one more and then we'll show you what everybody who's taking the test as a general score is getting. One more?
Yeah, I scored a 15, and as we were going through the test, I think this is going to be pretty easy. I'll have a 10 at the end, where I was going. And, so I thought maybe I mentally adjusted it, so I could say I can't be that lonely, or that, loneliness. But, that was kind of my interest. But, in listening to your whole conversation, the things that came to mind is we have isolation, and then we have connection, but we can be connected to a lot of people and still feel isolated. And then the third thing is what's your interests? And I mean, because I'm kind of a loner in a lot of things that I do, but I never have enough time to do all the things that I'm interested in. And
Right.
and so maybe that's kind of
Let me share with you my score at the beginning of this project was somewhere in the 30s, extreme loneliness. And over the course of this project, I've managed to get it down to moderate loneliness by doing the deep dive on the research, but also kind of doing little things in my life that are kind of obvious, like not using the self-checkout so much, going through the checkout line with a real person. I think all these things actually take more time. So loosening up your schedule a little bit allows you to have more interactions with people. I take my earbuds out more often. I don't walk down the street. I say hi to people walking down the street and take my earbuds out. So if they say hi back, so like a conversation has a chance of starting. There is a setting on your iPhone that you can turn off the colors. And you'd be surprised how less distracting the iPhone is, or your smartphone is, when you turn off the colors. And you're not looking down, you're looking up and making eye contact. Eye contact is hugely important to actually starting those conversations. That's my result. Joe, I haven't checked in with you lately on how you've been scoring.
Yeah, my score today, because we do this test often, so
That's all we have to do. We don't.
That's all we have to do. We're so lonely. But exactly. But my score does fluctuate. Today, I am a 31.
Uh-oh.
Right. How could that be possible? I'm barely a 31. it does fluctuate. And just to build on what Stu said quickly, some of the simple things. This doesn't have to be complicated with a big program to get out of this feeling of loneliness and isolation. Like the chat bench example, it's so simple, right? And as we sat there all day, we saw that it really works too. But Stu is right. Some simple things that we do, even though it might be more convenient, is, for example, I prefer to go actually into the bank and talk to the bank tellers who know me by name, and I know their names, and they know what's going on in my life. That's what happens when you live in a smaller town in the suburbs, and versus online banking. Or, I prefer, rather than sending an email, I was saying to you last night, to Lori last night, I prefer, rather than sending an email often, I'm going to pick up the phone and call this person and have a discussion about whatever it is. Even though I could send an email, emails don't provide tone or context, right? And so those are just a couple of things that my observations that I try and do on a daily basis.
And all these things we're thinking about are being challenged right now by this idea that we may not be able to safely do them. It may not be safe to go into the bank and do these things in person. So think about, again, activities that you would have done in person that you can't do right now, and how you might replace that social capital.
Stu, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say one last thing. And another thing that we found is, for a lot of people, especially older people, we found this in some of the small villages in England. Their only contact with other people is the village butcher, going to the post office, going to the cleaners, going to the bank, whatever it is. That is their social outlet. And so this convenience of having everything delivered, and literally you don't have to leave your house, right? Really takes all that away.
Would anybody like to share? Let's move on. There'll be time for questions and comments, and if you want to share your score a little bit later. But as a whole, how many people identified with moderate loneliness or got that score? Yeah, that's about right. And I applaud you for putting your hands up. Very often people feel reluctant to share their score because of the stigma of loneliness, calling it what it is, loneliness. And if there's one thing we want to do with this film, is self-identify and hopefully change the break the stigma a little bit, and hopefully that'll help us all get into the solution a little bit more. Would you like to see how people are scoring in general? By the way, this is all anonymous. We aren't collecting names, data, or anything like that, but we do look at the total, and we put together this slide after we had this is a couple weeks in on this, posted on our website, with about 341 completed surveys. Look at the donut, not the funnel. So those that identified with extreme loneliness made up kind of this larger white portion, and the people that identified with no loneliness were the smallest portion. Normal loneliness was a nice healthy pink, more than a quarter, but look at how many people are identifying with moderate loneliness, the red section, almost 50%. And that tells me two things as kind of the armchair observer here, is that I mentioned moderate loneliness is the point at which interventions work the most. So I can see there's obviously a problem here, and there's obviously time for us to collectively help people a lot. Because again, it gets a lot more difficult when you get into extreme loneliness to get people just to break the fear of going out. It is a vicious circle that happens, we can talk about in the Q&A if you like, of mental changes in the brain that make you perceive people as not wanting to be around you. The more you aren't around people, the more you misjudge the feedback you're getting, nonverbal feedback you're getting from people. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions and comments. Who would like to start? Okay, yes. So we're going to pass around the microphone.
If any ladies in this room are lonely, I'd like to volunteer to fix your problem.
Okay. That's all, folks. We'll see you later. I knew I shouldn't have called on you after last night. Have you ever been to the Gay Pride Parade in D.C.? Yeah, that was, thanks, Mr. Warner. Anybody else? Yes, sir, again. Joe, can you hand the microphone? Are we
So
able to-
one of the things
Okay.
that popped into my spirit, my mind, was the whole idea of expectations. And so one of the things that was presented in the film was the individual, and he talked about his childhood and how those things affected him from I can just frame it as from a negative perspective, right? These are negative things that impacted me, and I'm bringing that forward. But also from the point of view of expectations, hey, I had all these awesome things early on, and now later on, it's not as awesome. So have you guys dealt with expectations?
Yeah, so I think that goes back a little bit to being in acceptance. And, I know that just like everybody else in this room, I expected things to be different in my life at this point. I've had to get into acceptance about it. And I think the acceptance gets more important. The expectations need to be more realistic the more we age. I can't answer that as much as some of the other people in this room can. But here, kind of rounding out my midlife crisis and not having so many sleepless nights going, what? Time is running out. It's because I'm in acceptance. So I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you didn't know. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was in moderate, and I think it's because my husband and I have quite different goals. I'm in moderate, and that's probably because my husband and I have very different goals in life more than anything else. But I have a story I want to tell that I think you will be amused by. A woman came to me, I was in my 50s, I was active as a director of a nonprofit program, and she came to me and she said she really needed to be doing some volunteering. Her husband had just died, he'd been in the nursing home for 2 or 3 years, and she needed to go out and do some volunteering. So I got her involved in 2 or 3 different volunteer organizations in town, and for 10 years she was really, really active. Then she started going downhill. She was in an assisted living and ultimately in a nursing home. And while she was in the nursing home, she kept complaining that they didn't suggest anything for her to do to help other people. Or, no, they just weren't doing that. And I kept talking to them, and I said, this is a woman who's really been a big volunteer, and this is important to her. Can't you find something? And they said, no, she doesn't really want to volunteer. So I thought, okay, I got to do some research into this. So I said, well, how about if we start just at the level of maybe something really easy that she could still do? And they said, well, how about folding napkins? Okay, so we folded napkins supposedly for the dining room. And she sat there, I folded napkins, and she did not. And this went on, and I said, don't you want to fold some napkins? She assumed that because I was assuming that I was folding napkins, that she was as well. So she was actually happy with that then. But I didn't know anywhere to go from that. I just kept visiting her instead of trying to, maybe I should have kept on folding napkins, I don't know. But it was very interesting to me that, she still had this motivation because she was lonely, I'm sure,
Good comment.
I'm just
go ahead.
curious,
And then we'll come to you next. Let's start with you.
how do your interventions or your ideas for interventions adapt to people who are naturally introverted? Because it occurs to me that sometimes in the community I work with, people keep knocking on doors of people saying, come do something, and the person is introverted and they're actually kind of traumatizing them by inviting them out so often. So how does that change?
That's a great question, and as an introvert, I can totally relate. I don't like being up here, but there is actually a movement toward introvert volunteering. So there are things, I wouldn't call it like folding napkins, but like if there's a letter writing campaign and a door-to-door campaign that is going on in tandem, you know who you should give the letter writing part of it to. And introverts, they say, are much better at some of these things that are not coming in contact, volunteer activities that are not coming in contact so much with other people. Thank you, yeah. I'm sorry, yes.
Hi, so I have a suggestion that we can all do. I actually speak on this topic, and I'm so excited to hear you, and I want to talk about it more with you. But one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to invite somebody, invite a friend. I think we can all do this together. You know, if you are going somewhere, it's really intimidating to go by yourself, especially if you're an introvert. So I always encourage, if you are going somewhere, invite somebody that you think may want to go, because maybe what's stopping them from going to a community event is they don't have anybody to go with. So that's my biggest suggestion for people. The other thing is, so I work with older adults in the community, and I work with folks who live independently in their own homes, who are a lot of times isolated, living alone, don't have many friends, even in the apartments where there's tons of people, like that gentleman said on the video, and they don't know anybody living in the apartments next to them. We had a friendly visitor program in Kenosha, and the aging director would always ask, you know, the baby boomers are getting older. Why isn't the friendly visitor program exploding as it should be? Because the numbers always stayed stagnant. But what I found was, whenever we linked volunteers to meet with folks in the community, it was usually the daughter calling saying, my mom is lonely, she needs a friend. It was never the older adult themselves saying, I need a friend, I need somebody to visit me. So I think it's very hard to admit that I am lonely, I need a friend, I want a volunteer to come into my home and visit me. So what I always encourage community members to do too is to do a very non-threatening way of saying, you know what, let me help you with this thing in your house that you need help with. I see you need help with shoveling, let me help with the shoveling, or let me help you repair this. I used to be a plumber. And then you create a very organic, natural relationship that is not, you look lonely, let's talk, kind of a thing. But that you're helping them in some sort of way, and then you naturally begin that conversation and developing a relationship in a very indirect way.
Yeah, the one thing we learned right away is don't use the L word. You know, when you're interfacing, nobody wants to identify as lonely. And the other thing, I think, as listening to you, I'm thinking about is what's going on right now with all the self-isolation and social distancing. And all that, is an opportunity to go. I think I'm going to go make some notes and put them on the neighbors' doors around immediately around us, because we don't know our neighbors, and this is an opportunity. Let's seize the opportunity to go meet the people that have been next door to us, or the person you know who's isolated down the street.
Don't do that to the one across the street.
Not the one. Except the one with the refrigerator out on the driveway. You don't have to do that one.
I just want to say a couple words about. I live here at St. John's, and most of you can tell, or you have heard, that this is a very friendly place, and the staff is fantastic. However, one could become lonely here, and I think one of the keys for me is. Well, for instance, I take a swimming class 3 times a week, and if nothing else, I bump around into the other people, and we laugh and try to figure out what she just told us to do, how to bounce around. But physical activity with others, I think, is really helpful. I also chair a committee, we have a 50th Earth Day event coming along, and it's keeping us all very busy, but getting involved in more than just attending lectures or whatever.
Something that's more participatory, but you have to kind of interact with a good idea. Yes?
I think what's really interesting, and I always look at how people can be so kind. My parents moved into a facility. They're 90 years old. My dad has a walker. My mom has a progressive dementia. And they moved about a year and a half ago. My mom doesn't want to go out of the apartment. But the community is good. You go down for dinner. They're meeting with the same couples and so forth. And they have all these different activities, but my mom won't come out. She's a very intelligent woman that has dementia, and she knows that things are changing, and she's very self-conscious of that from a physical and mental standpoint. So being the daughter, I'm there, and I visit quite often. here in the Milwaukee area. And, you're beside yourself, like, what do you do? She won't come out and whatever. And I got to know some of the people there and the ladies and sort of sharing with them, gee, my mom needs a friend. And since I mentioned that to a group of ladies, now when I go there, they are going out of their way and calling out her name and giving her a hug and reaching out to her. And I thought that was just such a kind thing. I'm just so very grateful for the people in that community that they just didn't let her suffer by herself. So we're just basically good people.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that I'm a resident here at St. John's, and right after I moved in, someone extended the invitation to me to join the breakfast table, and we meet every morning, whether we ate breakfast or not. And we come down, and it's a big circular table, about 11 people can fit around between 7:30 and 8:30. And I had lived in a home, and I never had to decide who to relate to. But here, I had to learn how to work to relate to other people. And there are various people there. Some people don't talk very much, some take a lot. And I learned how to be a good listener, to hear other people. And there's a wonderful, healthy interchange, and it starts my day. I learn about other people, and if there's somebody who's pretty quiet, some of us who are extroverts reach out and ask them a question and get them involved in conversation. So that's a plus here.
I appreciate you saying about listening. Listening is a diminishing skill these days, just my personal opinion. Oh, I'm sorry. Just one second. We'll go here and then back there. Thanks.
I grew up kind of as a solitary child, even though I had an older brother. And I was always quite content with it, and found I'm still solitary. People don't believe that because I'm out and about and I participate in a lot of things, but I love my aloneness a lot. But there was a time that I needed more than that, and it was many years ago when my husband died, and I was on some drug to keep me from the major depression, and it just made me sadder, apparently, which I didn't understand. So I was sitting outside and reading and crying, and I thought, for God's sakes, Barbara, get up and go do something for somebody. And so I remembered that my daughter had a really good friend who was not going to make it through cancer. And I went and just bought some flowers for the garden thing and drove 18 miles, dropped them off, and left. I have no idea whether they got them or not, but it made me feel better. And I learned something from that. Nobody has to know that you've done something. You just do it and can feel better.
Yeah, maybe it's time to have a screening of that film, Magnificent Obsession. Does anybody remember that? Yeah, I'll let you look it up on IMDb. It's about what you're talking about. Yeah.
We'll have to wrap it up in a minute.
One more question then? Yes.
I'm Jean, and I'm chair of the resident council here. And if anybody here wants to be more active, just call me.
All right. Good note to kind of wind it down with. We are rapidly kind of ending our time this morning. And actually, we're rapidly finishing this film. It looks like it'll be done, hopefully, by the end of this year. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of people want to know, right, where can we see it? Where can I kind of follow up with it now that I've kind of been a part of the process, and you all have helped the process. It may be streaming on Netflix. It may, be on these streaming platforms that you can get in your own home. But again, what we like to do is work with organizations, and this is how we do our what's called a social entrepreneurship. We charge a screening fee to have organizations show this. That we plow back into the movement to get this message out there. So we're looking forward to working with organizations and communities to kind of do what we did with Jen Silent, our LGBT aging movie, which is have these kinds of discussions. And isn't this much better than doing this at home? I think there's a lot more connection that happened, and
It's less lonely.
less lonely. So anything you'd like to add before we wrap it up, co-producer?
Only that if anybody is interested in talking to either one of us afterwards more about the film or about how they might be able to see it in the future, please let me know. I'm happy to give you a card. And I also just wanted to thank my partner in crime for doing such a great job.
Oh, thank you. You were a fantastic crowd. Excellent questions, and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you for coming.